In this exercise, we are going to walk through a common problem, especially in specific fields such as machine learning or any time that you're dealing with large clusters of data. And that is the problem of being able to properly remove anomalies. So imagine that you have an array just like this. So you have an array of amounts, but you know that the data isn't 100% accurate. This is something that happens especially when you're dealing with incredibly large or very old sets of data. You may have, say, an Excel spreadsheet that has 10,000 rows of elements, and you need to be able to remove any of the items you know are way too high or way too low for consideration. So in this example right here, we have amounts 44, a little over 8,000, 443, 43,000, and 2,100. Now, this could be something where when I work with machine learning algorithms, a very common problem is many times I'm having to pull in data from huge CSV files, and many times they're not really structured, and they'll include things like the totals, and the totals will be listed right alongside with all of the other elements, and you need to be able to go in and clean that data up. So what we want to do is we want to have a method, and notice how we're calling and passing this method to the array, which means that we're going to open up the array class in order to do it. And this method takes two arguments. It is the low number and then the high number. So in this case, as you can see, since this is the input, the output we're expecting is to narrow this down so we only have three elements: 8,443, 2,183. So this is very helpful to know. And whenever you're working with things like this, where you know what your input is and you know what your output is, that gives you a really good idea on what you need to do in order to implement it. So in other words, in this case, we want to remove the element 44 and we want to remove the element 43,000. This would be a common type of method that you would build, but you can't really just hard code it. You can't say, okay, I want to remove the values 44 and 43,000. That would be cheating and definitely would be going against the spirit of the exercise. Instead, what we need to do is to have almost, if you think about it in terms of a real world scenario, think about having a nightclub, and you need to have a bodyguard out front that makes sure that only the right people who are allowed to come in are the ones, and rejects is the key word here, it rejects any of the people who aren't allowed in. That's essentially what we're going to build. So I'm going to say class array, and inside of this, we're going to call the method, or define the method that I listed down below on line 10, called remove anomalies. And this is going to take a low and a high argument. So the low argument is we're going to say we don't want any items that are below this number. And the high one is we don't want any numbers that are above this number. And now we can call a couple methods. It's actually going to be the same method, but we're going to chain it together. So I'm going to say reject and then pass it a block. So I'm going to say reject E is the block variable when E is less than the low number. And then I'm going to use a dot and chain on the next one. So I'm going to say reject, and we're going to say reject if E is greater than high. And this syntax is a little bit different, but this is something that if you are working with functional programming, this is usually the way that you would build it, especially when you're adding one line and chaining one line on top of the other. You put a dot at the very end, and then you indent the next line just by 2 spaces to show that they're connected, and then these are actually chained together. So what this process is going to do is it's going to first jump into this reject block, and it's going to say, okay, any numbers that are less than our low number, get rid of those. Then it's going to continue down the line, and it's going to say any numbers that are higher than the high number, get rid of those. Essentially what this could do is imagine that you knew in your data that you had kind of a bell-shaped curve where you had 20% of your data that was, or 10% of your data that was below a certain threshold, 10% that was above, and you wanted to get rid of the low and the high and only keep everything in between. This is a method that would do that for you. So now if I call amounts and call remove anomalies, for this let's do something even a little bit different than the test. Let's actually say we want to remove anything below 500 and above, let's say 5,000. So now this should give us a slightly different result set. And as you can see, we have a little bit of a name variable. It says amounts. Oh, and it probably would help if I actually put the data there. Okay, now let me rerun this. Running again now shows that this gives us 2183. So let's see if that matches up with reality. 44 should not be included, so that was good. It should have been rejected. 8,000 should have been rejected because that's above 5,000. 443 should have been rejected. 43,000 should have been rejected, and 2183 is the only one that fit within that boundary. So that is perfect. This means the result set is working very nicely. Now if I come down here, or open up tmux on the side here, and run rspec March 15th, we should have one test that's passing, and we do. So that is how you can build a method that removes anomalies in Ruby.